To my mind, the turning point was a story I wrote called $1 Million Murray, which is still one of the most, may be my favorite thing I've ever written, which was a story about homelessness.
$1 Million Murray started in the same way that most of Malcolm's stories start. He stumbled on an academic study in an obscure journal. This one was about how much it costs the state to keep homeless people homeless. Who was the academic that you stumbled on?
I can't remember the process. I never remember the process.
Was it a guy called Dennis?
Maybe, yes.
Dennis Cohan.
That's it. That's Dennis Cohan, exactly, who'd done all the great studies. Yes, that's right. Your memory is better than mine.
Well, my memory's not quite as good as you think, because yesterday I met Dennis Cohan, and
Oh, you did?
I was feeling that because I went up to the Bronx and, you know, discovered this woman who was, you know, kind of mad at you for basically convincing everybody that broken windows was a great idea. I thought I had to, you know, do the opposite. Dennis Cohan is a professor of social policy and psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. His research that caught Gladwell's attention called for a controversial rethink on how society should pay for the problem of homelessness.
The study I did back in 2002 showed that the average chronically homeless person in New York City was using over $40,000 a year in taxpayer-funded services. And at the end of the day, they were still on a cardboard box on a street corner. So clearly, there could be better uses of the $40,000 than that.
And you wrote all of this up in an academic paper, right?
Yes, several, yeah, many papers.
What were they called?
You know, they had boring academic titles. You know, public service reductions associated with placement of chronically homeless people in assisted housing, things like that.
Yeah, what else?
Or I did a typology of homelessness, cluster analysis, look at homelessness. Yeah.
I can never understand. I read a lot of academic papers in my job. I can never understand why they're always given such terrible names. Why? Is it because you don't want to come over as like kind of jazzy?
Well, you actually, you occasionally can try to be jazzy, but you don't want to be too cute.
Dennis's papers advocated simply giving homes to the homeless. In the long run, it would be far cheaper than constantly paying for ambulances and medical bills and overnight shelters. His work was well received in academic circles, but invisible to the outside world. Until Malcolm Gladwell phoned him. What do you remember the telephone conversation?
I didn't give it that much credence. I had no idea where this was going to end up. So.
Okay, so you don't remember that much of the conversation?
No,
do you remember
not
any of the conversation?
Very little. Until suddenly it showed up in print.
In the New York?
Yeah.
I want your money, but your money ain't right. So I'm packing it all in.
What Gladwell had done was tell a story of a homeless man called Murray.
These two cops in Reno, they had worked with this guy Murray day in and day out. They were picking him up off the street, taking him to the hospital, taking him to the jail if he got feisty, and so they decided that they were going to do their own little study of how much money had they spent on Murray. And they were the ones who came up with the $100,000 a year, and they'd been doing it for 10 years.
Okay, so he was $1 Million Murray.
He was $1 Million Murray.
It would have cost less money to put him in a hotel with a full-time aide than it would have been to let him live on the streets. Once that insight kind of enters your brain, it changes your whole attitude towards something like homelessness, which the notion is always that we can't afford to help them. And when you realize that, no, that's exactly wrong. You can't afford not to help them. They're bankrupting you on the street.
In the article, it had a dramatic impact, actually, because from that day forward, I couldn't hardly go into a room where someone didn't mention it for a good, almost a year. Ironically, it was itself a tipping point for the field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there's no downside to that story at all?
I would have a hard time finding the downside of that story.
Yeah, that's great. That he has that power and he wielded it for good.
Yeah, yeah.
Before Gladwell came along, there were 30,000 rooms like this in America. Rooms where the door keys were basically just given to homeless people. Now there were 120,000, in large part because so many housing officials were moved by Gladwell's story about Murray.